Welcome, and thanks for joining this short lecture on recession causes and recovery strategies, presented by Dr. Microlearning. In the next few minutes, we'll unpack what a recession looks like, why economies contract, and which tools policymakers, firms, and households use to weather downturns and come back stronger. Think of this as a practical guide to recognizing risks and responses during economic slowdowns. This slide contrasts recessions and depressions to clarify their impact and duration. Recessions are cyclical, with moderate but typically temporary declines. Post-war averages show about 11 months, whereas depressions are far steeper, long-lasting structural crises with widespread business failure. The key takeaway is that recessions require cyclical adjustments, while depressions need deeper systemic intervention and much longer recovery paths. Major recessions often start with sudden external jolts, like pandemics, wars, oil price spikes, or natural disasters. And the slide's flowchart shows how those shocks disrupt supply chains, push up costs, and sap confidence. When consumers and firms cut spending and investment in response, reduced demand can turn a fragile economy into a contraction, making an initial shock cascade into a broader downturn. Here we walk through the bubble and bust mechanics. A bubble begins with rapid credit growth and asset overvaluation, as easy borrowing and leverage push prices beyond fundamentals. The bust follows with wealth evaporation, lender retrenchment, and curbed spending by debt-burdened households. The net result is financial exuberance collapsing into an economic bust, as falling asset values and tight credit amplify the slowdown. This diagram shows how central bank actions can deliberately slow the economy by hiking rates and trimming money supply. Borrowing costs spike and loan volumes shrink. If tightening is overly aggressive, consumption and investment fall sharply, pushing the economy into a deliberate but painful slowdown. In short, monetary tightening can rein in inflation but also risks triggering a recession if applied too harshly or too quickly. The slide on government policy explains how austerity can become a self-inflicted drag. Higher taxes and sharp spending cuts aim to balance budgets but withdraw demand directly from the economy. Reduced public outlays lower disposable income, public sector contraction spills into private weakness, and the combined effect can magnify recessionary forces, turning fiscal prudence into a headwind for recovery, if mistimed or too deep. This feedback U-loop slide highlights how household sentiment drives spending choices and the broader economy. When wages stagnate or job security fades, households postpone purchases, raise savings, and shrink outlays. That retrenchment lowers sales, output, and employment, which in turn further weakens sentiment. The cycle is self-reinforcing, unless interrupted by policy, demand support, or improving labor prospects. The recessionary cycle begins with uncertain demand and tighter credit, and firms respond by delaying projects, freezing hiring, and liquidating inventories to preserve cash. Those immediate operational adjustments reduce investment in CapEx and R&D, weakening long-term productivity and prolonging the slump. The diagram shows how short-term preservation can lead to deeper, more persistent economic damage and delay the path back to expansion. This slide lays out how monetary policy can steer recovery. Lowering policy rates, asset purchases, and liquidity injections work together to cheapen credit, lift asset prices, and encourage borrowing. That sequence aims to reignite consumption and investment, creating a short circuit of the downturn and nudging the cycle toward revival, provided actions are timely and transmission channels function effectively. Fiscal policy can accelerate rebound when targeted and well executed, and this slide shows the mechanism. Unemployment benefits, infrastructure spending, and tax relief put income into pockets, offset private retrenchment, and stimulate multiplier effects. For maximum impact, these measures should be well-timed, temporary, and sizable enough to jumpstart demand and help the economy regain momentum. For firms navigating downturns, the recovery playbook emphasizes agile response and strategic pivoting. Map shifting demand, develop counter-cyclical offerings, trim non-essential costs, and strengthen customer relationships. By conserving cash and protecting market share while adapting products and services to new needs, companies can convert adversity into a competitive advantage and position themselves for faster recovery when demand returns. The final slide focuses on household resilience during volatility. Build buffers like emergency funds, prioritize paying down high-interest debt, and diversify income streams. Combine disciplined budgeting with continuous upskilling to stay employable, and adopt a long-term investment perspective to turn market dips into opportunity. These habits help households weather shocks and emerge with greater financial stability and growth potential.